morning. Welcome to the Cedar Falls Committee of the Whole meeting this March 5th, 2018. I'll now call this meeting to order. We have a few items up this evening. First is the Cedar River project. The second is a golf privatization update and bills and payroll. Kicking things off is our planner, David Sturch, to introduce the first segment here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, tonight I want to give you an update on Cedar River Recreational and Riverbank Improvement Project. That was kind of in the works for the last couple of years, so I want to just give a quick overview and introduce Shane with Riverwise Engineering and Larry Kurtz with AHTS Architects, and then we have Ty Graham here as a local enthusiast. But starting out with a project background, we started this project back probably in the winter or spring of 2016, and we kind of started with a public input meeting that's summer or spring in April, and that idea was just gathering comments from the public, and we took those comments and then came back to City Council or another public meeting, and that was down at the Community Center there in June of 2016, followed by council presentation in July of 16. So we kind of worked out some of those ideas and then came back to council basically a year ago to develop a master plan that was part of that river corridor. And in the meantime, we had some data gathering. The consultant looked at some bathymetric surveys, and that's a kind of a survey of the riverbed through this corridor from Center Street down to West First Street. And they did some profiling on that and looked at some hydraulics and river flows through that area. So again, in March of 2017, we came back to the council for kind of a master plan development idea. And what the master plan is, shows in the drawing here, is a kind of an upstream phase from basically the beach house down to the river or railroad bridge, and then a downstream phase from roughly the upstream side of the Main Street Bridge to the downstream side of the West First Street Bridge. And in that phase, we kind of focused on that phase with some couple projects or concepts on the riverbank and then in river activities. So with that, I want to move this to Shane with Riverwise, and he's going to go over some of those ideas and what they had developed. We entered in a contract with them last September, so they've been working on this project since then. So they're here to give a little update and preview. Thank you.
David.
First of all, David, thank you. Appreciate the introduction there, and thank you to city staff. We're really excited to be here tonight. Very honored to be a part of this project. There's been a lot of excitement around this type of a recreational project in your community, and we're honored to be here presenting this to you guys tonight. What we'd like to start with is our objectives and our goals and what we're really shooting for with this type of a project. First, we're trying to reintegrate your river corridor into your community. We're trying to take this resource basically that you guys have, which is commonly considered something that's dangerous, something that's a problem, something that floods, something that destroys property, and take it and make it an amenity for you guys. Our main goal is to implement your vision, the vision that you guys provided in the master plan that David just talked about there. And also, we want to create a project that doesn't increase the flooding potential. We realize that flooding is a big issue here. We know you guys have just gone through your levee project here, so we're really sensitive to that. And even more important than all of this is that we want to create an amenity for your community that keeps the young people here, that takes the brain drain that this part of our country is experiencing and keeps those people within these communities. Along those same lines, we want to take those kids that are sitting behind technology and sitting behind screens, and we want to get them outside. We want to pull them down to these cool activities that kids nowadays enjoy. So once again, taking the river corridor, reintegrating it into your community, and creating an amenity. Okay, the basis of our design, each park that we try to do is designed to mesh with the surroundings. So we're trying to invite people to the banks. We try to create native stone terraces that look really similar to what you naturally find on the banks of rivers. We try to create landscaping, and we try to enhance as well as create access points. Once again, let's bring people down to the river and use this amenity. What I have next is a couple before and afters. We really want to create some visuals for you guys to help build the excitement and give you an idea of what you guys have out there right now versus what we can create. So this is a picture of a before and after in Cedar, Colorado. This is on the banks of the Arkansas River up in the headwaters. On the left, you can see there's a flood wall, really similar to the types of flood walls we see all over the country. Concrete, steep walls. Everybody's thinking, hey, let's keep the river away from property. We don't want anything to flood. On the right side there, you can see we pulled out that flood wall. We put in some rock terracing. We created access points. We created trails in the upland area. The whole idea is we want to create amenity. So now people don't look at that flood wall and go, oh no, we're staying away from the river. They see an amenity and a place to get down to the water. This is Manchester, Iowa, just around the corner from you guys. Another before and after on the top left, you can see there, that's basically grouted riprap, a technique that's used to support banks all around the Midwest. On the bottom right there, you can see just the opposite. We've pulled out all that riprap. We put in native stone terracing, created areas people can come and just sit by the river and enjoy it. One of the key things you'll notice in that bottom right picture is if you have a look at that, well, we're not seeing the whole river there, but there's a few kayaks there. And there's a lot of people there. So one thing that's key is some people go, well, you're building these parks for kayakers. The reality, which we're going to get into a little later, is that these parks are for communities, and kayakers are just a small piece of the users that we see. Right here we have an example of the Maquoketa River natural ledges. These are just some terraces that we took pictures of to give everybody an idea of where we got some of these design ideas, which are to take these native stones and basically place them, and we grout them into place so they won't move. The idea is to create something that's somewhat natural and looks similar to these natural ledges that we're seeing in these pictures. Here's another before and after in Salida, Colorado. All riverfronts have stormwater outlets. They have utility crossings. They have different drop pipes that come in and out of these areas. If you have a look on the left there, that probably looks real similar to some different outlets that we've seen on the Cedar River around this area, the Maquoketa River, any of the rivers that we see in the Midwest. Basically, we have flood walls, we have concrete that's been poured in the river, anything we can to protect those banks. Our idea is really just the opposite. Get rid of all that stuff, pull it out, put in some natural terracing, try to integrate those outlets into the banks, and once again, take an area that's basically full of blight and create an amenity for you. Multiple user groups. So I'm going to get into this a little more later, but one thing we really want to drive home is that these are not just parks for kayakers. Kayakers, I kind of say, are the monkeys, or they're the show that's out there sometimes. But the reality is these parks are commonly used and often used by fishermen. You can see in this picture there's a single wade fisherman out there standing on a rock. That rock was actually placed by us just for habitat and just to create an area for these fishermen to come out. And then if you look on the right side, you'll see multiple user groups there, from kids playing on the banks. There's a kayaker in there. There's some floating fishermen a little further downstream. And there's some people that are just sitting on the banks that really don't want to get in the water. There's all kinds of people like that, as we know. Not everybody wants to get wet. Not everybody wants to go kayaking. Not everybody, frankly, is comfortable in a wet situation like a river.
Shane, may I beg your pardon just for a minute? We're going to try to get Councilman Dara on real quick through our phones.
Hi, this is Frank. I'm sorry to have missed your call. Please leave your name.
0 for 2.
0 for 5.
0 for 5.
Give it one more chance for it. He really wanted to call in, and we got what we got.
Send him a text and tell him to.
Hello.
Hi, Frank, are you there?
I am.
Okay, we'll start up our presentation again.
Okay. Sorry.
It's all right.
On a similar note, if anybody wants to interrupt and has a question while I'm presenting, I have no problem with answering questions or splitting it up a little bit. So maybe if I'm not noticing you, just raise your hand or something, and we can interrupt and move into that. Okay, multiple user groups. I think everybody got the take-home message on that. Okay, moving on, a couple pictures of some finished products just to give you an idea of what we want your banks to look like. The top left there, some stream or some trails right down next to the river, rock terracing to support that and make sure we don't have erosion issues when we get flooding. Kids out playing in the sand and enjoying the river. The bottom left there is actually I'm not sure if it's a class or if it was a kayaking event that was held, but you can see the number of people that are up on the banks, and there's actually a high terrace up there also that's just packed with people looking down upon the river, watching the event. And then the bottom right would be a local fisherman out enjoying it on an early weekday morning. So some of the key tasks that were completed in phase one, I'm going to move out of the pretty pictures here and try to give you guys an idea of the work that has been completed to date. Very specifically, we started with a data transfer from the previous consultants. They were very helpful. David and Stephanie with city staff were great, passing on to us all the technical information and existing data that we could use for the project. We reviewed the public, the council, and the staff concerns that have been presented so far. We also got the information from the prior public meetings that you guys had. We then moved into a market study and an economic analysis. Riverwise Engineering put together a consulting team, and on that team was a company called RPI. They are familiar and have done other economic studies real similar to the park that we're presenting for you guys. We hired them, but we also kept them at arm's length. We didn't want to have a conflict of interest. Us being the engineers and the project consultant, the main project consultant, did not want to be working any closer than we had to with these consultants, so we let them do their study independently and submit it to us. We are going to summarize it for you guys today. We're happy to answer questions. I think I'm really familiar with their work. But that being said, it was quite an extensive study. I think it's about 50 pages with a lot of data in there if you guys want to pour through that. Another key task that we did, which is really important for your site, is floodplain modeling. I touched on this a little bit earlier. As you guys know, flooding at your site it can be a real issue. We're really sensitive to that. It was made very clear from the start that we have to create a no-rise project, cannot have a floodplain increase in here. We have worked with the Iowa DNR on every project we've done in Iowa to make sure we did not have no-rise conditions, and we've been successful on all of those except for the city of Manchester, and we were working through the FEMA process to get through that. That being said, we understand that no-rise is a condition that we have to have on this project. Alongside that, we did upland and in-stream 30% design and costing, which we're going to present to you guys tonight and walk you through also. So those are the key tasks that we went through. Another one of the key things that we want to convey to everybody tonight is that 3 out of 4 of the people that are going to come down and use this type of park are not kayakers, and they don't even get their feet wet. They're people that want to enjoy the river. They end up sitting up on the banks like you see here. They want to come down and have their lunch there. They want to sit down and hear the water rushing through these type of features. So I always want to dispel the myth that, oh, you're trying to build this little park and it's just for kayakers. The reality is that's not the case. We didn't realize this till about 5 years ago when there was a study done by a lady out of the University of California, Berkeley for her PhD, where she basically came to parks around the country and sat there and watched and took notes and collected surveys from the visitors, and she came up with this number for us. And we had been designing them with the idea that we needed to have banks and bank improvements as a big part of it, but it really drove it home finally when we got these studies. So something we want to convey to you guys and make sure everybody understands. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the economic study that was done by RPI. Once again, feel free to interrupt as needed. They completed a study. It's about 50 pages. Basically, what they did was they collected data from local sources and national sources, statistics for use, different types of use, number of people, census data, to get a feel for the number of people, the kinds of people, and who's going to come out there and what they're going to spend. We're going to summarize some of those numbers for you today. If we need to get a little deeper into that, we'd be happy to answer questions and/or can potentially follow up with you later. Specifically, there's about 3.8 million people within a 3-hour drive of Cedar Falls. Similar whitewater parks around the country, they found attract somewhere between 23,500 and about 47,000 annual uses. And what we mean by annual uses is that if Ty Graham comes down and sits next to the river or plays in his kayak on one day, that's one annual use. If he comes down the next day, that's another annual use. We also realize there's plenty of people that are going to come down to the river on a maybe even a semi-regular basis, but each time they come down, we're calling that a use.
What do we mean by similar in terms of city size or course size, or what do we say when we say similar courses?
Similar size courses? Yeah, we mean similar number of features and similar recreational value.
Okay.
So there's some that may have lower recreational value. We're not getting as high in numbers. One of the key things that we see at your site is we have plenty of water. And one thing we find around the U.S., specifically the western U.S., is that we're water limited. Specifically in a lot of states, we only get snowmelt runoff to get enough water in the rivers for recreation. And that's really confined to the months of maybe April, May, June, sometimes July. Whereas here, you've got a much bigger season. We can go from April to maybe October, September, somewhere in there. So it's really more weather dependent here as opposed to water dependent. So there's a number of factors that go to it, and that's why we just say similar, because you can't compare everyone exactly. There's no way to quantify it. It's more of a qualitative comparison. Those numbers are also based on the American Community Survey and the OIA Outdoor Participation Reports from 2017. So he used some really recent data to get those type of user numbers. Okay, dollars spent. So this one's a little simpler. He basically went to the Cedar Falls Tourism Bureau and said, when somebody comes to Cedar Falls, how much money do they spend? And the Tourism Bureau said, well, they're going to spend about $173 per person per visit. And so then we started saying, well, we better look at this number a little closer, because what does that include? That includes lodging, food, transportation. They might go see a movie or come see some type of a show, and they may go shopping too and buy a t-shirt. And we said, well, every person that comes down and uses the river is not going to buy a t-shirt, and they're probably not going to go see a movie or catch a show every time they come and use it. So we think a reasonable number somewhere along there is kind of in the $50 to $80 range. We assume they're going to come, they're going to fill up their gas tank, and they're probably going to grab a hamburger and maybe a beer down at one of the local restaurants. So when you sit back and take these numbers, you take 23,000 people a year, and you start saying they're going to spend $50 to $80 a day per time that they come, we're talking about some real economic stimulus to your economy. Floodplain modeling, this is a little bit of the dry engineering, but we felt it was really important for you guys to understand. As I said earlier, dealing with flooding, it can be a real issue here. So we started right from the beginning. We've gone through the formal process of getting and conversing with the Iowa DNR. We know they're going to require a floodplain study. We know we have to have no rise. We talked about this already. We know it has to be stamped by a licensed Iowa engineer. We know it has to meet National Flood Insurance Protocol, and because of that, we've taken a very specific line of tasks to make sure that we are filling all these needs. To get through the first stages, we reviewed 2 different models that were created for this reach of the Cedar. One of them was created by AECOM, who is doing your levee project. So we got the model from them. And we also got the historic model that was created by FEMA for the area, and spent a lot of time working through those 2 models to try to figure out what we could do. We had to bring them into contemporary software, move them into industry-leading software, actually. We had to update them with the current bathymetry that was collected earlier in the project, making sure we followed these really strict standards that the government allows. We used bridge and levee geometry in the state-of-the-art model that we had to run these routines. We added additional cross-sections based on the bathymetry and where we thought we're going to put these structures. And the results we found is that we've got a model that mimics the existing hydraulic conditions in this reach of the Cedar River. So that right there is a big step just to get to the point where we have a model, we think it meets government standards, and we can start testing what we want to do out there. So the initial concept, our thought was, well, if we want to, and this is common in rivers, if you want to lower the floodplain, you need to open up the river. You need to cut material away. You need to let the water spread out. We started doing that. We created an entire design based on that concept. We're going to open up the river. We're going to move, let the river breathe, as it were, a little bit more. What we found was that didn't work. There's a hydraulic condition basically from the First Street Bridge that actually creates the opposite situation. The First Street Bridge constricts the river during flooding situations and can actually raise the water surface. So what we actually had to do was switch that. You can see up here, I said we actually caused a rise of 0.3 feet, right? We're talking about 2 inches. That's enough, as we all know, to cause a rise. It's a non-starter on this project, so we had to go right back to the drawing board and try just the opposite, which is adding some fill material, which actually constricts the river, speeds up the velocity of the river, and drops the water surface. A little bit of a technical engineering design there, but the reality is that we went through a whole process which we thought was going to work. It didn't work. We came right back to the drawing board, switched our process, and now we think we've got it working right. This is what you want to flush. These are the kind of problems you want to flush out at this stage of design, because we're still at the point where we're drawing renderings. We're not deep into the drawings. We haven't submitted permit applications to the government. It's easy to change things at this point. So we feel good that we found this problem before we got too far. Okay, the current design. This is a plan view rendering. We're going to show you a couple different views today. I'll start out talking about the in-river stuff on this rendering here, and then I'm going to pass it off to Larry with HTS. He was the lead on the banks and the upland areas, and then we'll move into costing after that. We basically have 8 features that we're proposing here. The first one starts up near the Main Street Bridge on the north side of the river. Just downstream of the bridge there, you can see some rocks in the river, a small feature with a trail that comes down to it. This is going to be the key, what we call put in or place to start for those wishing to have an in-river experience. They can come down just downstream of the bridge. They can pop in right next to that structure and move on down through the river, going through. There's actually going to be 4 different features on that side of the river that they can experience. We plan to create those features so that they operate at different water discharges. So no matter what the discharge, whether it's super low, or medium, people can still come out there and have a recreational experience. At high flows, all of these features will be inundated and they'll basically disappear. The river will look more or less like you would see it now if you had a high feature. On the same hand, there won't be any recreational value there at that point. We also think that's going to help keep people from getting in the river when the water's too high. That being said, on the south side of the river, we have very similar features, just not as many because it's basically a shorter reach. The idea, once again, is that people could come over from the Main Street side here, cross over the First Street area, and be able to get into the river and have an experience also on the south side of the river. So we want to have amenities both on the north side and the south side. You can see that the picture is centered now over the 2 different features that we show in there. You can also see there's trails that come down to both those features, allow people to get in and out of the river. Moving down now to the clay hole area on the north side of the First Street Bridge. There you go. This is the existing feature that's out there and has kind of been the impetus for this whole project. There's an existing whitewater feature that shows up right there as a result of the remnants of an old concrete dam. And we want to enhance that, is the short story. We believe that that's going to be one of the key focal points for the people that actually get in the river and want to recreate, the kayakers, the tubers, and whatnot. And we believe we can build either 2 or 3 whitewater features there. You can see we've got some little islands that split these features. And the idea is to create differing levels of skill as you move out towards the middle of the river. So the more timid people can stay close to the banks. They're going to go through that chutes that's closest to the bank. It's going to be easier for them to get right back out. The more aggressive people or the more skilled people that can actually paddle a watercraft out there can experience the feature that's more towards the middle of the river. So it's designed to kind of cater to people's different skill level based on where they are. And then the last thing, just downstream of that, just downstream of the First Street Bridge, we envision one more feature and a nice area for people to exit the river. You can see there's a concrete trail that comes right down to the river. There's a big eddy there, swirling eddy that will suck people in and help them get out of the river. Any questions about the in-stream portion before I pass this off to Larry and let him tell you about the bank work?
One question, everything here is real rock, or are you going to do fabricating rock to make these things?
We plan to use real rock, and that rock will be held, first of all, it'll be anchored into the bed of the river, mostly bedrock in this area, and the voids will be filled with grout. So we're creating a large mass of rock and grout to hold everything together.
Just one quick question. I used to be a kayaker on the river, and I've kayaked that area many, many times. Underneath the bridge is the only keeper on the whole river. You're aware of that, and you'll be modifying that somewhat.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll show you, we have a line item for that. I think we have almost 300,000 just for dealing with that. Another issue that we have with that is as that dam has eroded away, the rebar has shown its face in there. It's a very dangerous area right now, and people are out there using it anyways, which is terrifying to me.
We took a bunch of it out years ago with a hacksaw, but there's a lot of it there.
It's dangerous, huh? So we're gonna clean all that up. We need to make it safe for everybody.
Can you clarify what a keeper is?
A keeper is a hydraulic situation. Usually you see them at the base of large dams where the river recirculates upon itself. So if you fall down in that area, the river is like a washing machine. It'll just keep sucking you back in. Very dangerous and can often be fatal.
I have a question regarding your market study or economics that you talked about. You said that you felt an annual 23,500 to, was it 47,000 users per year?
47,000.
Yeah, and is that based off of the California one or off of, we were told before that you'd have about 59 usable days or no more than maybe 5 months, which 59 days would give you 381 people per day using the low number that you had. So I'm curious where you got those numbers, or if you can explain it a little better.
Sure. So I think the 59 usable days came from the earlier consultant.
Correct.
So he had a different design for controlling the water. We're trying to build features, and I tried to lay this out earlier, but we're trying to build features that'll be usable at a lot more ranges of flows. And so we're not trying to control the whole river. There's nowhere where we're taking the whole river and pulling it together and controlling it to make a feature. We're creating features, as you can see, on the banks. And so once again, it'll be valuable at a lot more days than whatever it was, 59.
Well, even if you took the 150 or 5 months worth, that'd be 150 people a day.
We can get, I think we have an email from Tim Vick, which I think got passed to you guys, not in that email specifically, but he says they will regularly see 200 people down at their park specifically on any weekend day.
I don't know who that person is that you're talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tim Vick is the city manager for the city of Manchester. So the project that was built in Manchester, we've been talking about it a little bit. So the next question is where those user numbers came from. He took the 3.8 million, he scaled those numbers down based on who he thought would actually show up. Then he took the OIC numbers from 2017 for whitewater kayak use, and I think that number was 0.04% of a population is expected to recreational kayak. So he multiplied that number. So what he's basically doing is taking this population and scaling it by use numbers that he got from a reliable source.
I'm sorry, that's a lot of people per day.
It is a lot of people.
So you're counting anybody that comes to the shore, not necessarily getting in the water.
Right.
Yeah, he was focusing more on the in-river use as opposed to the bank use.
Okay. But the overall numbers here that you're talking about is all users?
Yeah, I think he overestimated the number of people in the river and underestimated the number of people that will be on the bank. That's my personal feel on his numbers.
Good to go.
I'm going to pass the floor to Larry Kurtz with AHTS.
Thank you, Shane. We were real excited when we found out what we finally had to do with the river, and that was to, We were real excited about what we could do at the shoreline when, and you can see the picture here. I'll go through it real quickly. You have your existing condition. You have 2 really great parking lots. You got a great shelter. You got bathrooms already. So that really saves a lot in the cost to develop. What we did was then we added 2 patios, and I'll try to use the cursor here if we can zoom in. One is off of the bathroom, so all of you, whoops. So we've got an upper patio that's an overlook. Again, 3 out of the 4 users are going to be on the shore, so we want to accommodate them and get them a chance to come down to the river. So we have developed these 2 patios, one here at the top, and then one further upstream, right here, where we have 5% fall walkways that would go down to the river and access them from both of those locations. The 5%, under 5% is handicap accessible, and we don't have to use handrails and things like that. We don't have any formal steps that go here, so you'll be able to walk the gentle paths down to the river's edge and get to any one of the features that you want. We have kind of a high road, low road philosophy. We try to keep a path down at the shoreline consistently so that when tubers come down, they can just run right back up, and it's like a sled run in the summer for them. But then the ramps basically are for the casual visitor too, and to go to the bathroom. My cursor doesn't seem to find it. Anyway, so we show an image in the next picture where we can enhance some of these upper patio areas with possibly a splash park, and we do intend to use lighting in the trees. We have that in the budget to light down onto the whitewater features and or fountain areas so that we get a little bit of dancing light feature that goes on, because the park, you know, you're going to see the park's very visual and you're going to be seeing it for most of the year. So when it's not summer, we still have light and some things going on, I think, that are pretty lively and neat to look at from the other side of the river. We did put in the budget kind of a blank item because we think the park would benefit at the parking lot entry to have some kind of an entry feature, because it is Gateway Park. And that's kind of where we've done in the past our projects involved an artist or an artist group to create something kind of special there at that entrance. So we kind of left that door open to collaborate with them. We have talked to geologists and got a kind of a start of a program going where we do some educational signage along the river describing the geology, the hydrology of rivers, the riparian vegetation. So we do some educational things there. We've got that in the budget too. I'm just going to move on to the next picture. Our concept for that is something like this at the upper plaza, where we would incorporate water, an entry point, and this is where we could use that lighting effects on the white waters to create this dancing light effect, and we think it would be a really popular spot. Oh, yeah, we can. Sorry. So this is a typical cross-section at one of the river or whitewater sections where you can see the rock extending out down into the riverbank. You can see that low road or the 3 or 4 foot path at the bottom so you can access the river. We're showing a picture of one of the old cottonwood trees. We do intend to save those where we can and use the large stone riprap to protect them from further ice damage. And then we'll show that the upper path there and potentially the water feature. And then the upper plazas are even higher up. And this is a section where we don't have one of the whitewater features. We still have access. You can still step into the river from there. We do intend to have some plant pockets with riprap in them so that we can break up the large amount of rock that we'll be using to armor the banks. Typically, these rocks are set at so they're all seat wall height, if you will, so that they can be used. We do want to separate the bike path from this area. As you can see there, one of the original designs had a bike trail coming down to the river. We don't want people racing down to the river on the bike trail, so we've made 90-degree connections to that to protect pedestrians from that. I'll turn it over to Shane.
Okay, cost breakdown here. We've kind of broken it up into 2 sections for you guys to make it a little easier. We've got the riverbank amenities, which is the top of the chart, and we've got the in-river amenities as you move down to the bottom. Very specifically, The onshore improvements, just over $1 million. Design fees, $108,000. Contingency, $272,000, which is really high at this stage of design. 30% design, you want to keep that number pretty high, with a subtotal of about 1.5 million. Just below that, you can see a line item, additional enhancements in design. That would be the plaza areas and the waterfalls that Larry was talking about there. Those are add-ons and or subtractions depending on funding and desires of you and your community. Moving down to the in-river amenities, I think Dave was asking me about the clay hole safety improvement specifically. We've got $275,000 specifically earmarked just for that area, cleaning it up, getting rid of concrete, and shaping that area to make sure we keep an amenity. Fishing jetties and the whitewater features, $370,000. Coffer dams and some of the other improvements, about $800,000. Design fees, $200,000. Contingency, $355,000 for a total of about $1.9 million. The grand total, if you add up the riverbank amenities and the in-river amenities, should be about $3.9 million. There's our costs. Any questions on that? We can come back to this too if we need to.
A couple questions actually from the last couple of slides, if that's okay.
Sure.
The
On the
patio,
sections here?
Yeah, the patios you mentioned, what are the materials like for those and how do they fare in the winter?
Well, we have concrete patios for the most part. We've got a price in there for concrete patios, but it's a pretty high price so that we can do stamped and colored concrete if you like. If it changes to like a splash pad, it's going to be, it's quite a bit different outlay in money for that. There was the $300,000 I think you showed.
So what kind of annual maintenance costs would we be looking at then?
Well, it's just, it's typically going to be what any other normal concrete paving is. We plan to protect the ends from undermining from flood water, but everything's going to be flooded regularly there. So the natural stone really does hold up really well, and it has shown to do so since we've even done the project in Charles City. So I'd say it holds up really well.
Okay. And then you mentioned some tree removal. Do you have any idea of how many we'd be talking about?
Well, we're going to try to save the trees that we have there, the big trees. So I don't think we have any trees destined to be removed unless the city desires to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
On your, you show the riverfront master plan as of March 2017. And on there are 5 drops below the dam. That's not included in this. This is from East Main downstream, correct?
Correct. So that's phase 2. We're working on phase 1 right now, which is just that lower area.
Okay.
So that hasn't been included yet.
Are you going to have an estimate today on phase 2?
Do you want to answer that, Dan?
Yeah, their contract was just focusing on the downstream section of that from Main Street down to First Street Bridge. So just, any more questions? Just want to kind of wrap this up here.
You had a question, Dave?
I grew up on the Missouri River, which had a lot of whirlpools, and it really wasn't safe to get into. So when Shane talked about at the fishing jetties that it would create that natural whirlpool and suck them in, can you explain to me if that's a safe feature or more about that whirlpool that you're creating?
Really, every river is dangerous, and people need to take proper precautions if they're going to enter a river. We always recommend and include signage with any of our parks and any of our projects. We always want people to understand river conditions before they get in.
Okay, that doesn't really answer. I'm asking about the whirlpool you're going to create. How strong of a whirlpool is this?
So whirlpool is maybe a misleading term. Really,
I think that's what you said, though.
Yeah, really what they are is eddies, and what an eddy is a slower backwater area. So they're always slower than the main river because they're quote hiding behind rocks or something like that, and they create a velocity refuge. They do go in a circular motion, but once again you're losing energy. So any person that's out in the river is in a higher energy area than they would be in these quote eddies or whirlpool areas that I'm talking about.
So they should be easily able to get in and out of that.
That's the whole point of those areas, is to help people get back to the river. The other thing you'll see about them is if you just get on the edge of the eddy there, you're out in the river and you just get on the edge of it, it's actually going to take a swirling motion and bring you right into the bank, which is exactly what you want. So,
How deep is the river as you're showing it here? I know it's probably a snapshot in time, but is there a rough estimate of how deep it is?
it can vary greatly out there. Yeah, I mean, it just really depends on the discharge you're dealing with.
Have any of these other projects experienced floods? And can you talk to what some of the mitigation is, or ways to keep it from being damaged by
Yeah.
the flood?
All of them have experienced floods of different magnitudes. Everything from, there was a flood, I don't know if any of you heard, but in Lyons, Colorado, about 2 years ago, some people called it a 1,000-year flood that went right through a whitewater park that was built in the early 2000s, and many of the structures just disappeared. They were never to be found again. Much smaller river, different situation, but we're talking, some people called it a 1,000-year flood. So that's a possibility on any river. The river will always end, or the river will always win in the long run, so I don't want to deceive you and say this is going to be out there for 100 years. We have some parks that have been in operation over 30 years at this point and still functioning effectively without problems. That being said, I also include in our budget 5% first-year maintenance, because what we find is once we build these parks, we can usually go through one big hydrograph or one decent annual flood and get a good feel for places that we're either going to have erosion or places that we're going to have some sediment buildup or places that are going to create problems. Mm-hmm. And so right from the start, we want to set aside that budget so that we can come in after that first hydrograph and make those tweaks, is what we usually call them, to make sure that those structures are functioning for the long term. But that being said, once again, everything's built with concrete, large rocks, and grout. Those are the three primary materials that we're using to anchor the river and these structures.
I've had the opportunity to go up to Charles City when that was going in, and Manchester when that was going in, and Mr. Graham was there and showed me around, and he's very dedicated to make sure the job gets done absolutely right. I'm very impressed with both of those, so I'm really interested in looking to see phase two, because that's what interests me more than this is the float part of the trip.
We are too.
And I'm interested in seeing what that's going to turn out being. But I really appreciate the way you put this presentation together. It shows very well what we're buying, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Anything further for Shane? Yep, Mr. Sturge should come up next. I think we have a recommendation.
Yeah, I just want to just kind of wrap this up. Appreciate your comments. Very good here. But basically with this project, they're going to kind of finish out this stage of the contract. And we want to move ahead with the endorsement from the City Council as this is presented, and then finish this out, then go into permitting and start developing. We want to recommend them to go into a supplemental contract to start the development of a final design. And you know, get this project, keep this project moving forward. Our idea is to do some public outreach here later this year and into next year, just to keep it moving forward. You know, getting out and talking to service clubs and trying to find some champions out there, and maybe doing some fundraising for some of those additional elements that was identified, like more in the upland reaches of the project. And then once we get through the final design, we have a real hard number, a real good idea what this is, and we can go look for grants out there to help fund this project, and then get ready for construction here in FY22.
Thank you, David. Open it up for discussion for council, or looking for a recommendation?
So what are the additional costs that you would be incurring before you start seeking the funding?
Well, the cost would be move it into the final design, and those numbers that you saw on there did include final design. So it'd basically be another supplemental contract with Riverwise to take these ideas and design ideas and move into that more of the engineering side of it, and working with the DNR, the Army Corps, to make sure we can get permitting going for these two.
And are we aware of any grants or fundraising that's been done?
Oh, we can look at CAT, we can look at gaming, we can, You know, there's some grants out there. DNR's got some grants. They can, the consultant can surely help us look for some ideas and some monies out there.
Mr. Blanford, sorry.
Shane, in your opinion, do you expect that we would not have any issues with DNR approval?
I don't anticipate any deal-killing issues with the DNR, but we'll go through a number of different sub-agencies within the DNR. They always have comments, questions, and concerns. They always do. If they didn't, they wouldn't be doing their job. So we expect that. That's part of it, but no. The short story is we believe this is a permittable project.
Thank you.
Mr. Wheelan?
Are you looking for a motion to accept?
Yeah, that'd be great. Want to formalize it?
Yep.
And motion from Mr. Wheelan to accept the next steps.
Second.
And a second, any further discussion from council, just in general?
I do have a question. Fundraising, or excuse me, the funding for this, a fair amount of this, I think $1 million was going to need to be privately fundraised. Blackhawk Gaming was another portion of that, I believe. Flood reserve funding. I'm curious about the Blackhawk Gaming side of that. I know we regularly visit with those folks looking for funds. Should the private fundraising happen at a faster pace on this, I assume it's much the same as any other project where, say, in no time we come up with $1 million, we start to adjust the schedule, I assume, as far as what we're asking for from gaming and the other pieces of the puzzle here?
I'll take a shot at that at first. We submit to the Blackhawk Gaming Association or the board a schedule of, very similar to what our CIP is, a schedule of the projects that we have and the ones that we anticipate gaming funding for. And annually, as the CIP comes out, we adjust those numbers and the schedule with where they go. So to answer your question, yes, if for some reason the project moved up, we would be able to adjust that and possibly ask for those dollars earlier.
Anything further before I ask for a vote? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay.
One nay, that does pass to move forward. And Frank, are you there? Do we still have Frank?
No.
We don't have Frank. Okay. Frank's gone, but I think we're okay. The quorum. Thank you, gentlemen, for everything. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Investment, discussion. Next up is our golf privatization update. Introduce Mark Ripplinger. Move that forward.
I want to make sure everyone got situated. Thanks, City Council. We wanted to do a little bit of an update. It was about 18 months or so ago, we came before the City Council. We have 2 new members, and so we're going to do a little bit of a background of what we completed 18 months ago. Start a little bit about, talk a little bit about the budget. You can see on your screen right now, since 2001, what you see up there is times when the city general fund or the property tax had to support losses to our golf operation, and that was times when we had Washington Park Golf Course when that was still open, then also Walters Ridge and Pheasant Ridge. You can see in 2002 through 2004 we actually showed a little bit of a profit, but in the other years we would see losses anywhere from $22,000 up to $181,000 in fiscal year 12, and again those all had to be supplemented with property taxes or general fund dollars due to losses to the operating budget at that time. Here's just a little bit of graphical representation to that. Anything you see in 2002, 2003, 2004 below the zero, that was when we made a little bit of profit. Everything above the zero line were losses. And what we threw a trend line in there, and obviously you could see the trend since 2001 was increasing losses to our golf operation. So back in 2015, 2016, the City Council wanted to try to find ways to solve that problem. So they asked staff to research different options to take care of that. We came up with 4 different possibilities. One would be privatization. City owns the course. We'd have an outside company or individual manage it. The course is owned by a private company. The city would sell it outright and not own any of the golf course. Sell the land and turn it into housing or commercial or something like that, or continue to work with city staff for full operation of the facility. City Council immediately took the sale of the course off the table. They did not want to lose that amenity for our community. They wanted to continue to have staff research ways to take care of that deficit and wanted to take a look at possible privatization. So that's the direction staff went with the City Council decision on that. So prior to last year, back in calendar year 16 and before, we had a golf professional. John Bermel has been with us for 20 years, and his job was to manage the pro shop, take green fees, manage the driving range, make sure we have merchandise for sale, and those sorts of things. He's also been a longtime coach for the men's and women's golf teams for UNI. The city's portion of that is we would take care of the maintenance of the course, cut the grass, fertilize, use pesticides as much as we had to, irrigation repair, building maintenance, and those sorts of things. So we were the individuals taking care of the facility, and John was the individual who was actually operating and meeting with the customers on a daily basis. So once we discovered really that the city operating the facility was not going to be favorable, we were trying to control our costs as much as we could, but we were not making very good headway on that, as you could see from the numbers I showed earlier. We proposed going to privatization, and we had a couple public meetings with the Park and Rec Commission, and we had about 100 people come to one of those, and I think another one came, we had a few fewer come to City Council, but their clear message was that they wanted to retain John Bermel as our golf professional. They wanted to make sure that the city did not sell the facility, and they wanted to see if we could work out an agreement with John to take over not only the parts he currently had, but also the maintenance of the facility. John is here tonight, and he'll have a few words when I wrap up here, talk a little bit about how it's going. But he was interested at that time, but obviously he had not seen an agreement, so there was no real decision made until we crafted an agreement for him to look at. So some of the advantages, of course, over the course of 6 years, we might be able to realize $1 million reduction to our operating costs. That's a savings to the city of $200,000 a year, $180,000 over the course of the 6 years, could be close to $2 million, or excuse me, $1 million. We would be able to retain our current golf professional, and we'd also be able to continue to own the course. Of course, some of the unknowns, we've never done this before. The city's always been operating their facility. We had no experience whether we're going to have outside companies maintain it. There's a little bit of a lost control of the city asset. We are not able to utilize it in some of the manners we had before. We weren't sure how long this business model would work because it was the first time we ever put it together. And then we felt that we had a problem or concern losing some of our experienced golf staff during this change. So as we worked through this process, City Council will recall we had a couple different iterations of the contract. As it all worked out, and I think it was one of the last 2 meetings in December of 2017, we were able to work out an agreement with John that he would take over full operation of the golf course, except the first year the city would participate in some of the maintenance of equipment. We would share some of the costs. It was basically a time when we could work with him to turn things over to him full-time, which would have been as of March 1st this year. The city would normally receive about 7% of the revenues would go into a capital account, and we use those capital accounts for irrigation upgrades or maintenance of the building, if we had to put a new roof on it, those sorts of things. But in order to get this jump started a little bit, we worked out an agreement that the very first year John would not provide the city with any reimbursement, but as we keep moving through the contract, we would see $100,000 go into our capital improvement program in 2018, $20,000 the following year, $30,000 in 2020, and then cap out at $40,000 annually starting in 2021, and it would stay at that level until we renegotiated the agreement. The other component of the agreement was that certain pieces of the equipment that really didn't have any value to the city anymore. Golf equipment's pretty specific to that particular maintenance. We would make those available to John to purchase after the first year. So that's kind of where we are up to today. In 2017, John took over the golf course, and instead of it being split into two different responsibilities where he was responsible for the pro shop and those aspects, he's now responsible for all of the maintenance that the city staff completed prior to 2017. He hired his own staff. He had to schedule their hours, make sure that the course was maintained as high a level, and so people would continue to play it, pay for chemicals, fuel, oil, and those sorts of things. Here's a little bit of a graphic. I included in your packet something that really wouldn't show up on the screen tonight. It's basically just a summary of the different rounds. Back for the last 5 years, they were broken up into adult rounds, junior rounds, senior rounds, those sorts of things. They wouldn't show up on the screen tonight. But here's kind of a little bit of a graphic that shows where we have been since 2012. Can't see it myself. Obviously, we had a little bit of a low point in 2014, about 23,000 rounds. But every year we've grown. And the last time the city operated, we were about 28,000 rounds. But John, his first year of operation, he increased that almost 5,000 or 6,000 rounds. So that's certainly encouraging to us that this model will work, and hopefully will continue to work for him. So one of the things when we put this agreement together, there's always going to be things you might not have thought of. So we provided in the agreement a number of pieces of equipment that we thought could be turned over to John and so we can maintain the course. But there's some pieces of equipment we did not include that we believe are probably valuable, more valuable to operate the golf course than they are to the city. And so the proposal is to come back to the City Council maybe in 2 weeks or 4 weeks with an amendment to that agreement with a few more items listed on there that we'd like the council to consider making available to John to continue the golf course. To be honest with you, there are pieces of equipment that the city's owned, but we have not even used them from the Parks and Public Works perspective, so they would certainly have more value to the maintenance of the golf course. So you will be seeing an amendment coming to that agreement here shortly, again within 2 to 4 weeks. At this time, I'd like to invite John to come up and provide any comments, how his first year went. It was a little bit humbling. I have to admit, I saw on Facebook a couple times that the golf course was never maintained better. So obviously that's a testament to John and his golf staff that they were able to do that in 2017.
Thanks, Mark. Quite a learning experience for all of us getting involved in this, and believe me, I think it's really turned out much better than I thought it would. And going forward, I think that the way we have things set up, that there's a chance for all of us to be winners in this deal. As you can see, that the rounds are up. The golf equipment is a big expense, and going into this next year, figuring out how we can take care of the equipment and purchase the equipment from the city, and hopefully keep the ball rolling here. I know that there were a lot of comments on the condition of the golf course, and I'm very proud of my staff, and quite honestly, that's a lot of staff people that were working for the city that we've hired to help us out with this endeavor, and it's really been very refreshing to see that these people have gone above and beyond to help make this a better operation. The equipment is obviously a big thing, and to try and get so that we can purchase the right equipment and help maintain the golf course to a level that we think is pretty important, is very, very important to us. So we're excited about the upcoming years, and quite honestly, we were very excited a couple of days ago because we thought we were going to open a lot sooner, and then today showed up. So, but I'll answer any questions that anybody might have about the operation or anything.
Go ahead.
Director Rickblinger had said that you're not able to use the course in the manner you had before in a couple of occasions. Has there been other ways to, like, have there been major problems for you that you've had to redirect your efforts, or what did that mean?
Some of the things we would do when we would have nonprofit agencies come to us to donate rounds to them for fundraising, it was not our asset to be able to do that anymore. So we would direct those individuals to John. So we wouldn't do that a lot, but obviously that would have some value to somebody that wanted to make some money for a nonprofit. So those are sorts of things that we kind of lost a little bit of control of.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Whelan?
Is the profit and loss statement available for last year?
That's John's private, that's his private business, so that would not be available to City Council.
And we're not receiving any funds from last year, correct?
At this
Throwing
time,
that into rough and,
right. At this time, there was no payment to the CIP, but there will be starting in 2018 here.
and that's based on a percentage of what?
It's based actually on a flat number, Dave. We were looking at 7%, which was adding up to maybe $40,000 or $50,000 over the course when we were getting all of our revenues, and we just wanted to kind of slowly get up to that total in about 4 or 5 years. So we'll be up to that about 7% total in about 2021, I believe.
Well, thank you.
Very good. We do have, sorry, I went further. Is there a recommendation? Or was that just,
There'll be no recommendation tonight, but we will be bringing that agreement back to you in a couple meetings.
okay, very good. Thanks to you both. Appreciate you
both.
coming in.
Thanks, John.
Council, our last item on the committee here, is there a motion for bills and payroll?
So moved.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That does carry us to the end of our committee of the whole meeting. Council, okay to start at the top of the hour? Need a few extra minutes? We'll start at the top of the hour for our regular meeting. Thank you.